Hello. Oop. Cool. I thought I heard someone come on the audio. Sorry. Oh, gotcha. Sorry about that. All right. So, when did I cut out? Like, did you miss anything, or like was it just for like a minute? Gotcha. All right. Cool. Yeah. Let me know if I'm lagging. I'm not. It seemed to work all right in the last class, but I'm not sure how the local streaming, locally recording, and modeling will work. But hopefully, it's not the worst thing ever. All right, so yeah, so this is an example of like, it's a quad, but it's not a great quad. It's kind of like a really bizarre, stretched out thing. Quads ideally will be at least rectangular, and this is like some ungodly, weird, I don't even know what to call that, trapezoid thingy. So like I said, not the worst thing ever, but it's also like not ideal. For something like this down here, this is not fantastic edge flow, but it's like one of those areas where it's like a weird thing to do, and it also smooths fine, so it's the kind of thing where, like, I'm not really going to hunt you down about it personally. But yeah, so that's mostly, like, how I would do the pot for, like, these little spout things. Does anybody have any questions about what I did for this? Alright. So the next thing that we want to do to this is, obviously, we can't just, like, have this thing floating here as, like, a weird cup plane. We need to thicken this, and the absolute easiest way to do this is to just select the entire object, extrude it, and I'm going to turn off symmetry, and I'm going to leave symmetry on, and decision. But I'm just going to pull this out along this blue axis here. This is like the z-axis. And basically you can thicken your object or thin it as much as needed. So that's the easiest way to thicken this, and that's why I started modeling it as a plane. Things to be aware of when you do this, sometimes if you do it too much, it will, like it's done down here, make some really bizarre clipping issues on the model itself, where like you have like this face is just kind of being consumed by the object. So this is one of those instances of, I would expect, in this case, the smooth model is kind of fine, but I would expect the unsmooth model to not have overt geometry issues. In this case, like, it's clipping through itself. So this is an area where you could do a few things. You could go through and you could just be like, well, I guess I don't really need the outside to be like as aggressively creased. Wow, that's like really creased. And you could just sort of like very low key like merge those, eek. You could just sort of merge those vertices together. So this is not the ideal solution, because assuming that you wanted that, nice hard edge, that kind of like very much breaks apart doing that. So this is one of those instances where it might kind of make sense to go in and just do like an edit mesh. Maybe try like an average vertices. You could also go in and hitting F with symmetry turned on is like so annoying. You might just need to go in and kind of like manually squish stuff around until it kind of does what you want. So a lot of times I'll use I'm hitting G to do average vertices. Oh god, the checker texture. So sometimes that'll do a good job of just sort of like splitting things up from like where they are, and again, you might just need to kind of like mash a few things back into place. This can happen when you do that sort of like extrude trick that I just showed you guys. You just want to make sure that as you move stuff, it kind of lines up with like where you think it should be. Especially that's kind of the thing from before, where like why I didn't want to do the circular eyes on the object is like doing this can obviously like affect the profile of the object. So just be aware of that, but it's not the end of the world if you do need to go through and do something like that. So I would just do that on the other side and kind of like call it a day. So the other thing to be aware of is that, in this case, the top of my pot, maybe it's kind of hard to see, at least from the side view, it's pretty much flat. So I'm just going to grab these top faces and just scale them down so that they are flat. And then the other thing you would want to do, so if we go ahead and we smooth this, basically we have like it's a decent looking little pot. But the top edge is collapsed very aggressively, where if we look at the reference here, you can see that's like pretty much a flat, unrounded edge. So the way that we want to do that is the same way that we want to harden a cube, basically. This is like a weird cube. So what we can do is go in with our either insert edge loop or multi-cut tool, and if we add one edge loop on either like the sort of left and right of this little top piece, we'll smooth that. We'll notice that it also looks significantly better than it does already. So multi-cut, if you do, it's holding Control Shift X is the hotkey, and then yeah, holding Control will pull up the tool settings. The other thing you can do, which is super fun, is if you open the multi-cut tool settings, if you go into the actual multi-cut tool, and you expand that, they actually give you a crap ton of keyboard and mouse shortcuts. Which is, like, I don't know what a lot of these do. I just know that, like, I usually use it for edge loops, and you can hold shift and some other things, but yeah. But that's there if you guys need it. The UV tool editor also has some similar things to that. But yeah, so technically for this to be a sort of completely defined edge. So you'll notice, like, if I smooth this right now, this, which is like one of my bounding edges that should be pretty much left at the corner of the top of the pot, if I smooth that, it's getting pulled way the heck down the side. And that's going to be particularly not ideal if, I'm going to throw a planar map on this. That's going to be not ideal if we smooth this, because you'll see that that UV seam is now also being dragged way the heck down the side of this object. So something that used to be camouflaged kind of nicely at the top is now like, hey, look at me, I'm right in your face. So to avoid something like that, you would also need another, that's so hard to look at. You would also need another edge loop running along the top here. And what the actual heck is this thing from? I didn't add that in there. Wasn't trying to. Anywho. So I'm just going to go into multi-cut again. Hold Control. You will notice that it stops at the top of this little cap thing. That's because it hits a try, so you just have to go in and draw that manually. And draw that all the way over here. And multi-cut another one on the other side, because I made this geometry weird. This is why it's usually not bad to avoid tries in your stuff, because you will see, like, I had to jump through a lot more hoops than I should have to add that edge loop in. And then also make sure... Oh, I'm sorry, hang on for 2 seconds. I need to go and give the post lady 27 packages. Back in a minute. Pretty good. I have many, many packages. I found 24. Oh, wow. Sorry. Yeah, thank you so much. You're welcome. Have a great day. You too. Be safe. Thank you. Back in a minute. Sorry. have returned. My bad. I try to schedule my post pickups for days that aren't class, but I think they missed the one last week, so I had a very large accumulation of packages just chilling on the couch. Alright, cool. Okay, so where was I going with this? This has made a very aggressive end gun by multi-cutting this in here. So you do want to make sure that, like, as you're multi-cutting through stuff, again, you're just paying attention. You can run the end gun search, or in this case, I knew that was going to be an end gun when I did it. So to fix that, you can just grab this and do a merge to center. The nice thing about doing that is that it should give you a lovely row of quads around the top now. So like now we can run a whole loop around the whole top of this object, which is always delightful. So we have that, and you'll see that once we do that again, we have, now that edge loop, when we smooth it, it's still chilling around the outer corner instead of being sucked down into the oblivion of the side of this pot thing. So we can do that, again, to the inside as well. Same basic multi-cut process. Because you have, again, this... Did I double-click that? What did I do here? So we have this edge that, again, is just missing a loop on the inside. So that is, like I said, pretty much exactly the same process. So I'm not going to do that again in the interest of getting through some of the rest of the model. But that is pretty much the pot. It's a goofy little pot, but it's my pot, gosh darn it. Does anybody have any questions about this before we go on to some other stuff? Alright, cool. So, if you, I lied, I'm actually not done with the pot, it turns out. So there's, I completely forgot about it, there's this side piece that comes off like this. And that basically, we can do a few things for that. So one of them is, I'm just going to kind of grab approximately the faces on the echo. That actually is a pretty good approximation. I'm going to grab the faces on the top of this, that are, you know, wherever that little lip thing is, and I'm just going to extrude those and pull them straight up. You also might need to tweak the angle of this, because this, I mean, I know I can sort of tell from the reference, but like the angle of this kind of matches the reference, or the, God, what am I saying? Sorry. The angle of this matches the angle of the inside of the pot, so it's not like a sudden straight up abrupt edge, it kind of like continues back. But you can see, like, smoothing is pretty forgiving with doing this. I mean, you can move it like a little bit, and it's not going to be like a huge issue. So I'll just move that up, kind of like nudge it into place. And then I'm just going to start, like, chunking in some of the rest of this. So it seems like, it looks like there's an area where it stops kind of here. I'm going to do another extrude and just push that up, and again, kind of sort of slide it a little bit back. So this is going to be basically this top part of this pot thing that is like coming off the side here. And you'll also notice, maybe you've noticed that if I'm trying to figure out like where something is, or like where I should start or stop a piece of geometry, I usually do that in unsmoothed mode. That's just because sometimes in smooth mode, it gets a little bit weird. Let me demo it on a circle really quick. So it gets a little bit weird trying to figure out exactly like where something is, which sounds very strange, but like if I leave this smooth and we pull these out to the side, like that's all fine and dandy. But, so like here's basically what looks like the edge of this object. If I unsmooth this, you can see it's significantly farther past that. So basically what happens if you're working in smooth mode and you're like pulling this out and you're like, alright, cool, I need to stop here, and then you go and you do a bunch of modeling in smooth mode, then you unsmooth it, and all your dimensions are really off. So it's a good idea to block things in low poly, and then go in and add your loops like once the overall sort of shape and form and scaling is there. Because it'll just kind of make your life a lot easier in the long run. Again, I used to model in smooth mode, and then I was like, I'd put something in and I'd be like, wow, this is in a completely different place than it should have been. Yay! So be aware of that, and I mean, anyone who's modeling stuff for their finals already, like, it should probably be low poly already, so I don't imagine that would be an issue for most people. Alright, so what I'm going to do is come through, grab these little loopy dudes here, and I'm just going to throw them all the way back. This also does become flat at the end, which you can kind of see, like, at the top here. So I'm just going to take these and scale them flat. Cool. It also seems like I've grabbed very much some extra loops, and yeah, that looks... Can you do that? Oh, the scaling? Oh yeah, literally all I did for that, so I have these faces selected. All you need to do for that is just take them and scale them on the whatever axis you want them flattened along until you physically cannot scale them anymore. That'll pretty much make them flat. Did that help? Cool. The only thing to be aware of is Maya does not give a flying fadoodle if you scale an entire... For some reason, it like only does it with faces. You can scale this entire thing flat, and then you have issues with overlapping geometry. So like that's just that's just like a thing to be aware of if you're going to do that. Make sure that you're not doing it on something that's going to make overlapping geometry. But yeah, it's like super fun. All right, so what I'm going to do, since I've just objectively screwed this up very badly, I'm just going to delete these faces. Got a quick video in model patching. So I'm just going to basically cut these out of my model with wild abandon and splice them the heck back in there. And this is going to be actually way more annoying than I expected, and that's fine. It'll be a good learning experience or something. So what I'm going to do is grab these 3 edges and then grab... Actually, I can't grab this edge because there's nothing there. I'm going to do an edit mesh bridge on these, and I'm going to do an edit mesh bridge on these, basically closing all the holes I can to start with. And you'll notice that there's a few issues with this. I mean, one, there's still a giant hole in the model. But I also have, if we smooth this, you'll notice this is one reason I always look at smoothing mode. It makes it super crazy obvious if you have issues in your mesh. So in this case, we have not only a hole in the model, it's basically just a hole in the model. So the way to fix that is basically to add these loops back in here. So I'm just going to multi-cut in something kind of close and be like, cool. And now that's not fixed. I mean, it looks, in unsmooth mode, it looks fine. If we smooth it, you can still see there's a bit of an issue, whereas like we look at the rest of this, and it's like a nice sort of smooth beveled edge here. And this is just like this god-awful, horrible, pulling, weird thing. If you look at it on textured mode, it's also not super great there. It's not the worst thing ever, it's not good. Basically, this is Maya telling you, via the smoothing view, that this object is not connected together. So like obviously these vertices are still a hole in the model. So what you want to do is just grab these dudes and merge them to center. And you'll see as you do that this pulling kind of goes away immediately. That's a sign that the model is probably fine, and there's no like weird giant catastrophic holes in it. So now that we have those loops in there, we can select these 3 edges and these 3 edges and do an edit mesh bridge of those. And now we have a delightful, fully attached model again. Hooray. Are there any questions about any of that? Excellent. All right, so moving right along. I think this is probably going to traumatize a few people, and I think this is actually low-key similar to the pencil sharpeners, like the side shape. Let me see if I can find an image of the bottom of this thing. I know I have them. I just need to figure out where I put them. Okay, so this is the bottom of that shape. And actually, it's different than I thought it was. So, ew, God, yeah, this is like kind of, it's not the pencil sharpener, but it's sort of that. Sorry. Yeah, the pencil sharpener was like an evil object. I'm actually considering just straight up taking that off the list next year. Feel free to chime in with thoughts on that. But anywho. So basically what we have here is a cutout where this just sort of extends downwards, and then there's some random holes in it. Trial by fire, I like it. Some evil people. Alright, so what I'm gonna do is just throw in an edge loop. Gosh darn it. Sigh. Yeah, sorry. I think I have this weird thing where sometimes I'm like, I want people to do stuff wrong because you learn a lot by doing that, and then you when you figure out a way to not do it wrong, then it makes you remember it. And it's very tangible because, like, oh my god, like, I remember I did this horrible thing and, like, this would have fixed that. Anyway, so, you know, do with that information what you choose. Anywho. So I'm gonna go in and just sort of scale that down, try to get it kind of close to the reference. And I'm gonna punch in an edge loop somewhere in the vicinity of this. Actually, it probably makes more sense to multi-cut that in since I do kind of want it. It doesn't really matter. Indecision. Sorry. That was weird. Alright, so I'm just gonna grab this loop and I'm gonna scale it flat. This is gonna cause some of that issue that I mentioned before where it's like distorting the edges, but we're just gonna kind of like fudge it back into place. Cough, cough. Yeah, booleans. Booleans are evil. Here's a bit. If I haven't done this bit already, for the love of God, do not use booleans when you're smoothing an object. There is one instance of doing that kind of makes sense. And if I remember correctly, closed it. There's a video on that. When booleans aren't evil, and this is literally the one time, if you are ever smoothing your mesh, that I have ever found booleans to be helpful. Ever. Here's my bit on booleans. I'm not gonna lie, I use booleans all the time. However, most of what I use booleans for, I model most of my stuff now is low poly, or no, sorry, not low poly, unsmoothed, just with extremely dense meshes that are like 200,000 polys, because I'm doing 3D printing. So I will absolutely, like, if I have, I don't know, some kind of weird shape, some kind of, this is a really bad example of a weird shape. I don't know what this thing is. I legitimately don't understand what I've just created. If I have this weird shape and I do need to just like punch a circle out of this for the purposes of, you know, 3D printing, if I'm making like an eyeball or something like that, I don't know, this is a terrible example. I will absolutely mesh smooth these to get them to the resolution that I need to print, which is something like this, which is terrible to work with. And then I will shamelessly boolean that the heck out of there, and then run a mesh cleanup on it. The downside of doing this, yeah, I don't know. If this is an eyeball, this is like really terrifying. It is. Oh my god, it is. This is like Mike Wazowski with cordyceps. Anyway, but if that's what you're into, but the reason that Boolean works for this is because 3D printing does not care about edge flow at all, and when I do this, it is the last thing I ever do to that model. I will model this all in like unsmooth mode with smoothing, and then when I'm done and ready to do stuff, I subdivide the hell out of it, and then I Boolean it together. It's not a thing you want to do when you're working on a model. Anyway, that's my bit on Booleaning. There's that one supplemental video that maybe would be helpful for part of the newer light thing, if you're trying to overachieve on the newer light thing. But yeah, Booleans. Does anybody else have any, since I'm on a Boolean tangent, does anybody else have any questions about Booleans? Alright, cool. Somebody asked me this the other day. I mean, they exist because they are helpful. They're just not... yeah. Booleans. Wait, what is this? What is this? No, I'm curious. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, this is a weird class where, like, Booleans are super helpful, but, like, for this class we're also trying to teach you how to do stuff without Booleans. So it's... Oh, okay. Yeah, Booleans... Yeah. Booleans are really good for making certain shapes, and I'm certainly not going to say that I'm not going to sit here and tell you I don't use them, because I do use them a lot. It's just not good if you're, like, actively trying to model a thing, and they can, like, really destroy your meshes, and for smooth meshes... That was my bit. I was trying to show you why Booleans are gross for smooth meshes. So if I was like, alright, I need a hole in... Why is vertex? Okay, here we This is also going to be like kind of a not great example, but if I'm like, all right, I need like a weird hole in this, let's just go ahead and like punch a hole in this with a Boolean, like a crazy person. If you, damn it, that's not a terrible example. It's not terrible up here. Down here, it's pretty awful. But Booleans, like I said, they'll make a lot of n-gons in your stuff. Especially if you're working smooth mesh, even if you run a mesh cleanup on that, and I changed my settings of it because I'm an idiot, it's still going to smooth really, really badly. And also doing this makes it almost impossible to work with the rest of your mesh. So Booleans are like I said, love, hate. Don't use them for smooth modeling, ever, pretty much. But they are good, again, if you are trying to get a high poly model for low poly modeling, or for game modeling. Also totally not terrible for that. Anyway, so yeah, I think I'm going to stop harping on the Booleans, but feel free to ping me if you have questions about them later. Alright, so I'm going to smush this back into space. I have such a love. It's so funny. Sorry, I'm going to go off on another mini tangent. It's so funny because I was taught to like never use Booleans in school and like blah blah blah. And then like once you learn more about modeling, you know like when it's appropriate to use Booleans depending on like what you're trying to do. And like I break all the rules that like people told me to do because I like understand what it's going to do to my model, and then like I understand if that's going to be a problem. So it's one of those things where it's like right now I'm telling you like don't use Booleans for the assignments, but like, you know, they're not evil. They're just sort of like there. I have no idea what datan is. Anyway, back to this demo, which I feel like I've gotten horribly, horribly sidetracked on. I see. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull this down so it kind of matches. In this case, I think I took this from a little bit of an angle, so you're just going to have to like fudge it a little bit. And then I'm just going to grab these verts here, and that's clearly angled. So what I'm going to do, since this matches like the top reference but not the side, is I'm just going to kind of try to match the angles of the side reference. So like if this line is pretty much parallel to this one, I'm going to call that good, which also would mean that I would need to like squish that out a little bit. So now we have this basic shape, and that's all fine and dandy. We got this whatever goofy little thing we got going on here. So before I go any further, I am going to smooth this because this is objectively not the shape that this is. So basically I'm going to do the same bits before, low-key kind of rushing through this because I do want to get to some of the other parts of this. So I'm going to go with my multi-cut tool, and again, just like, that's a pretty hard edge, so I'm just going to kind of like throw an edge loop in there. Alright, cool, so this edge should be done. We get a nice little edge there. Same thing on this side, pop an edge loop in there, yay. And then do the same thing up here. And also in here, and here, so that this area is hardened, and then throw a loop in there, and a loop in here. So now we have something that should be, you know, pretty good. We don't have any, you know, very extreme, like, rounded edges we don't want anywhere. However, by adding that edge loop in here, you can see we have, like, basically something breaking the nice, perfect flow of our evenly spaced circle. So if we look at that, you can see it's making a very subtle pull in that model, or like a little, it's like a mini crease. It's a very subtle mini crease, but it is a mini crease. That is specifically a thing I'll be looking for in your models. Mwahaha. It's a not terrible fix, honestly. Probably what I would do for this is just throw in... Alright, I'll do it on the outside because I didn't fix the inside. Actually, this isn't going to work on the outside either. Cool. Alright, so probably what I would do is actually just go through and grab this vertex and use V, which is vertex snapping, to force it into the same place as this one. At that point, what I can do is grab both of these and do a merge to center. So it makes a little try in the model, but what I'm able to do is then grab this grab the rest of that loop and control delete it, and you can see we get that nice hard edge over here without it ripping down the side of the model and like making some weird lumpy stuff. So this is another one of those instances where, like, if I was in school, my teachers would have freaked out because I was using tries, and I'm like, meh? Hardcore meh in this case. You could also actually, now that I look at this, so there is, we could totally get rid of this try, and it would be a really, really easy, actually kind of nice way to do it, actually. And that would basically be, we have these two loops really close together, grab these little boogers here, and now I'm trying, grabbing all the wrong buttons today. But merge those to center, and then we can basically just pick one of these and get rid of it. So what that's going to do is, one, it eliminates a try, which is always kind of nice in terms of like adding edge loops. The other thing that kind of makes that nice is if we need to add an edge loop now, we look at this and just because I know how this is going to run, it feels like extruding the faces in, but basically it'll give you a nice loop running sort of all the way around the top of your object, which, you know, can be nice if you need to add an extra loop in there. But either way, try or doing this, pretty much the same deal. It looks pretty much the same aesthetically on the model. It just depends kind of what you're going for. Alright, so that's pretty much the top of this, and then there's those weird little holes on the bottom, like these little nubs. So I have the reference for these if you guys wanted to like import it properly, but for the sake of being quickish about this, let's go in and punch them in manually. Wahaha! Alright. So I'm just going to kind of approximate where these are, but normally if I was going to punch a hole in something like this, I would say, alright, here's my top and here's my bottom of this. What I'm going to do is add in like 2 more loops, and this is going to define basically like where that little curvy bit is. So like we have these round bits, so we need this like weird pill shape. So what I think I'm going to do is come in and basically just sort of grab these. I think what I'm going to do is just kind of like fudge that shape. First thing I do want to do is make sure that these edges are parallel. So I'm just going to use that like scaling trick where you grab the edges and just smoosh them flat most aggressively. And what I'm going to do is just grab these dudes and these dudes. Very scientific. I'm going to grab those vertices and I'm going to scale them together. And then I'm going to scale these guys together. So you can see we're kind of getting like the beginnings of this pill shape. And just because it looks a little bit nicer and a little bit straighter with the geometry, I'm going to kind of straighten these out, which that is really like entirely optional. It's just going to make life, it just looks a little nicer, honestly. It's purely an aesthetic thing. Alright, so now we have our weird little pill shape. What I'm going to do is, I'm actually not entirely sure what the heck that shape is, so I'm just going to treat this like a button. Basically grab this and extrude it inwards. Alright, so we have these, our delightful little buttons. I think this inside area is hollow, which I'm not really going to be super... You could make it hollow. If you want to try to overachieve on this, make this area hollow. Otherwise, it just kind of... It might get a little bit into pencil sharpener territory. So if you want to just treat this as like a button, and then you just like add those little cable things in, like that's also fine for this. Alright. So obviously this does not smooth well, it looks pretty terrible. So what we're going to do is add in the rest of those loops. And I'm going to turn symmetry off for this, because I want to demo 2 different ways to do this. Have I not saved this? Good God. Pewter pot version 1, in case Maya crashes, cough. Alright, so there's 2 ways to smooth this. One is I just need to add an edge loop in on the bottom, and along the top. Be like, alright, still a little better. We still need the loop on the inside. So the easiest way to do that, I've found, there's a few different things that you could do. The easiest, by far the easiest way, is just grab these faces, extrude them, and scale them in a little bit. What that's going to do is basically give you a nice edge loop where if you need to select around the outside, you're able to do that. And it gives you a nice like loop of quads running around the bottom. The other alternative is basically you would have to go in and... So I added the same edge loop there. You would have to basically go in and like harden this edge, and also this edge, and also this edge, and also that edge. And you can do that. It's just kind of a pain. It doesn't make a huge difference here because this is basically just like a flat area, so like extra loops aren't really going to hurt it. But it's also going to rip those loops down the side of your pot, and you have to just like deal with them later. So you could deal with, if you did have something like this, you could deal with it in a few different ways. My personal favorite way is basically just forcibly recreating the geometry you have here, which is, it's added extra stuff, which is basically, same thing I kind of did before, is like grab those edges, do a merge to center on those, grab these little dudes, do a merge to center, then you should be good to basically just go through and delete that. if you had done that on the rest of these like that. So you'll see that this basically, in many extra steps, recreates the exact same geometry that we had on the other side of this, right? So we have that nice, well, it gets a little weird because I didn't do the other side, but we have that nice little loop of quads, and we have that nice little loop of quads, except this took like 30 more button clicks. So this is also something that I touch on in the video, it's like the third video, I think, in the playlist of edge flow with the extrude tool. So again, highly recommend that out for checking that out for like making buttons and all that good stuff. But yeah, so that's more or less these. That was like a really janky version of this. But yeah, so I think I'm actually going to really quickly delete these just to get them out of the way so I can finish demoing on this. Because this is another one of those instances where, again, we have this top loop, which should be this sort of like holder edge here. But what's happening is basically it's, you know, you can see it's being stretched really aggressively, which is, again, weird for UV seams, weird for just defining edges in general. So we still do need, we have this loop on the bottom, but we need this loop on the other side. And we could either do the same thing we did before, which is go in and like add, you know, a bunch of loops on every side of this, and then you just have a bunch of loops in your model, or you have to terminate them. Or my cheat, and I usually do this actually before I make the button, is if you select all of the loops on the inside of this, including all of these faces down here, and basically the entire inside of this little hole, grab all of that and extrude it, go into your regular scale tool, and just scale it in slightly. Obviously that affects the overall shape of your button. You know, it might make it smaller than the dimensions on your reference. But if we smooth that, we get this nice, really, really hard edge. This little holder edge here is still where it should be. It's not being mushed into the rest of the model. So doing that little extra extrude is really kind of nice. Ooh, God. Nice and handy. If you find that in the process of modeling you have destroyed the back part of your model aggressively, in this case, probably easiest to just cut the whole piece out and bridge it back together. Huzzah! And in this case, so we have this one loop here. So if we do an edit mesh bridge with one division, and then don't forget to just sew those guys back together, we have lovely, beautiful topology. Once more. Huzzah! All right. So the other bit, so again, if you were planning ahead and you were going to do this from scratch, imagine I wanted to put like a circular hole button here. What I would probably do for this is circularize these edge loops. If you see them circularized and it does not look circular, you're probably in smooth mode. You need to make sure that you're in unsmooth mode. And then what I would do is just go through and scale that in, do that little extrude for the edge, extrude again, push it down. And if you're planning ahead, buttons are really easy to add in all these loops as you go, just with, you know, multiple extrudes. So I'm just kind of hitting G to extrude again, and then pushing it down and scaling it in, and then like in 2 seconds you have a perfectly circular button. So that's easily the easiest way to make a button on a flat surface that I've found. That's most of the shape for this thing. Does anybody have any questions about that before maybe popping over to a different random part of this object? Alright. Is there a particular piece of this that you guys would like to see modeled apart from that? I do actually, I have this thing? Cool. Tube it is. I do have a very nice tube hack. So I have 2 alternative ways that you can make this. I'm going to turn off the grid because I find it extremely hard to look at. Probably the absolute easiest way is to start with a torus of the appropriate-ish length, question mark. And basically what I'm trying to do here is line this up so that it kind of matches with the curvature of whatever that little thing is. Basically get it as close as you can. I'm going to say that's pretty decent. And then chop off the top, chop off, that kind of goes off at an angle, so I don't really need that. So I'm gonna normally I would cut it into quarters like this, except in this case I think doing that actually follows the model better. And then grab the edge loops and pull it up. In this case, this is like seems to be a little bent, so you might gotta jimmy it into place a little bit. So you do this, huzzah, death. Yeah, and like I said, just kind of like drag these into place. For these curves, you probably will need to like rotate this a little bit as you go, otherwise it tends to get a little squished. But that's pretty much the tube. And then you would just want to make sure that you close off any of the edge loops, so that you don't have. I'm nitpicky. I will look for this stuff. You close off the edge loops in the end. So basically, just do again. I'm just going to manually add a little loop. Extrude again, and extrude again, and then merge to center, and it'll close off that little loop and give you a nice hard edge there. So you guys want to see that again? Let's grab the edges here, and then again extrude. Just push it out like a tiny bit just to make that extra little loop. Extrude, scale it in, extrude, and then merge to center, and that'll give you again nice little hard edges for that. So that is option 1 for the tube. That is honestly probably the simplest option for this particular tube. Before I go on to the other version of the tube, does anybody have any questions? All right, cool. I love making shapes like that. So also as a tidbit, for the demo of the newer light thing, there's like this weird metal band running around the whole end. It has some beveled edges, and I was like, super easy way to do that. Start with the torus, extrude half of the faces, pull them over, grab the bottom half, extrude, pull them down, and now you have this very, very ordered loop of things, and you can just drag it to be whatever random size you need it, which is super modular and very easy to work with. The other nice thing about doing that is it pretty much automatically smooths nicely, because you already have, all the loops you would need in there. So that's beneficial. You can pretty much just set it up and you don't really need to think about it too much. So the other tidbit with that is if you say, like, let's say I set up my torus for, where is the actual, oh right, I moved it, okay. I gotta make sure my image plane's behind things. So let's say that I set this up to be the wrong width. I actually got that pretty close, surprisingly, but let's say that you did need it to be a different width. What you can do is extrude the entire object and push it in on this blue handle, and you can see it'll make like this nice little, basically it gets a little weird at the ends, but it'll make this really nice little basically core in this, so that if you go through you can double click on the outside and delete it, and then again with the exception of the end you have a very nice clean version of that little handle piece. And if you wanted to clean up these ends, all you would really need to do is you could do one of two things. I think the easiest thing would honestly just be to delete that and just reseal the end manually, because that's just kind of funky looking, honestly. But yeah, so that's a thing you can do. You can also do that. That would, technically speaking, work for this. Like if I were to, I don't recommend doing this on more complex pieces of geometry like this. It gets weirder much faster. Are you gonna actually extrude? What are you doing? Guys, I think I broke Maya. I had a full crash last class. Yep, there we go. Cool. Yep. The good side, and this is a perfect time for a tangent about saving versioning of your files. So with this particular crash, yeah. So with that crash, you'll notice that it flashed the Maya had a fatal error thing. If you get that, usually it will auto-save you a file right before it crashed. So hopefully I get that. But in case it doesn't do that, if you ever get like a full crash where it just shuts down randomly, like if you were to, forcibly end the program, usually, in my experience, I've not found a good way to recover files from that. But if you get that fatal error, usually it'll give you a recovery file that I'll show you in a second once this pulls up. But you should always go through and save versions in case something like that happens. Ooh, okay, yeah, here we go. So this weird little local temp file it tried to make me is this recovery file. So what you would want to do if that happens is try opening that. Every once in a while, this file seems to get corrupted. So I will usually, as soon as I open that, I'll go through and I'll just save it. And I will save that as a different version of version 2. I will save that as a different version of my file. Like, do not overwrite an existing file with this in case it is corrupted. Because if it is, then you've just deleted a bunch of information. Yes, good. My extrude has done, it has extruded and then left a crap ton of geometry just floating in the same spot. Anywho. But yeah, so like I said, don't override files if you think something might be corrupted. That's a great question. I honestly don't know. And then it's also good to, every once in a while, maybe like if you're about to make major changes to the model, or if you've been working for an hour, manually save a different version of the file in case you do something stupid or Maya does something stupid. Because I have absolutely deleted, I've done a bunch of stuff, gone past my edit history and be like, wow, I destroyed my model and I can't fix it. And that's something that, like, if you don't have another version of your file, you're kind of screwed. Anywho, that's my bit on saving. But yeah. I think I was just demoing random stuff with this, which, yeah. Does anybody have any questions on the weird tube thing before I go on to 2.0? Alright. So, tube version 2 is basically using Nurbs Curves. And what a Nurbs Curve is, well, I'm not going to explain what a Nurbs Curve is. I'm just going to show you how to use them. Cough. So if you go to Nurbs Create and Nurbs Primitive, Curve Tools. So create Curve Tools. You can open CV Curve Tool. There are some settings for this. I think this is usually the default setting is 3 cubic. I'll show you what that means in a second, but basically what it allows you to do is you can go in and you can draw like a curve in the shape of whatever you want. So I'll do something really weird over here just for the hell of it. So we have this beautiful curve, and you can see that here at least it, you know, makes sense with the pot. So this you can manipulate basically sort of like curves in Photoshop or Illustrator, but if you right click, control vertices are similar to like actual vertices, where like if you grab this and you drag it around, it'll modify the shape of the curve. So by default, these will behave as smooth models. Like, so notice this is not like a linear point A to point B to point C. Unless you choose your setting from cubic to 1 linear in those in these settings here. If you set this to linear, it will behave like point A to point B. Alright, so what I'm going to do is basically you can just sort of reshape this as needed to be whatever you want. So this is usually what I'll use if I need to like run this particular cable or something like that. And what you can do is I'll show you 2 different versions of this. I'll sort of drag this over. I want to make something sort of more interesting. And I'm going to duplicate this. Like I said, I'm just going to do 2 versions of this. And I'm going to hide this pot. I'm going to hide that pot. So I'm going to go up, and the first one I'll show you like the easiest way to do that will work on for the little tube thing I just did. And that's just make a little Nurbs circle here. And what you want to do is drag that close to the top of your curve. And what you can do is select, I might be messing up the order, but select the curve and the curve you want to extrude it along. And if you've ever wondered what this surface is tabbed for, it's for Nurbs stuff. So if you go into surface and extrude, there are some settings. These are usually the ones that I use. If something gets weird, honestly, a lot of times I will just kind of mess around and change settings at random and see what it does. But with these settings, this is what it gets you. It's actually done this very badly. But basically, it'll go through and just, oh, I see what it did. It'll try to extrude this curve and make that shape for you. Except at this point, I think it should actually be at path. And this is what it'll give you. So basically, it's extruded this little circle thing along this curve. The fun thing about this is, ignore the fact that it's inside out for now, is if you modify this curve, it'll modify that shape for you. So it is a really handy way, again, to like make stuff like wires, where you can very easily be like, ah, this doesn't wrap correctly around the side of my table, and you can go in and like manually modify that. So I have some stuff going a little bit more in depth into that in the tutorials. The only other thing that I want to show you is, like, imagine that this was the curve profile from the cable itself. So I'm trying to think of the quickest, easiest way to do that. And actually, I was playing with this the other day because someone was asking about it, but apparently if you take this, you can sort this to caps and sides, and this will basically give you like the top of a cylinder. If you do less subdivisions, this is basically just the top of a cylinder. So I'll set this to 10. Basically what I'm doing is very, very quickly roughing in a hideous version of the profile of this stupid cable. It's not pretty, but here's a cable profile. So what we want to do is move this all the way over here, and this is where it gets a little bit weird. I just want to show you this can be done. Again, the video goes over this more specifically, because it seems like there are some other pieces that people want to look at on this. But if you select all of the faces in this plane, it has to be the faces for some reason, and then you shift select the curve, and you do extrude, just like a normal extrude, Control E, that you've been using for the last few weeks. It'll do this. However, if you come into this little box and you give it more divisions, this will follow this delightful curve that you've made. Also, you can manually enter, like if that is not enough divisions, you can manually enter much higher numbers in there if needed. There's also a setting, which is super fun, I'll say 50 for now, that if you go into your channel box and look under twist, you can make this twisty, which normally requires really obnoxiously high values like 3000, but if we do that, you'll notice that we get this nice twisted braided cable, which kind of looks like a demon churro at this point, but it'll give you something like this. So you can do that for the cables, and again, if you were to do this, and you can modify the shape of this curve, and it's going to take your polys with it, so it's a very nice non-destructive way of modeling stuff. Yeah, no worries. There's a few other things you can do with Nurbs Curves, but they're not super relevant for this class. But that video is in the later part of the playlist as like the optional bit if you want to look at it. But that's my fun thing. So you can do this for really weird stuff. I have some tutorials about how to make barbed wire and some other like Christmas lights and other weird stuff with this. Hello. I have a spam risk calling me apparently, and my ringtone is, hello, my name is Inigo Montoya, you killed my father, prepare to die, screaming it with sword fighting in the background. Very awkward when it goes off in a supermarket. Anyway, so that's that. Like I said, good for cables. Not really going to go into that, because the videos pretty much cover the rest of that. I try. But yeah, so I think that's probably the hardest part of these pots. So once you do this, I mean, you could use, like, for these little curves in the bottom, like whatever these little wires are doing. You can also use Nurbs Curves to generate those. I think the rest of this is probably mostly straightforward. Is there anything else in this pot that you want to go over? I missed details. Alright. Cool. So in that case, so, also for the pot, I took pictures of it in case you want to model it. It is designed to sit on this little cooling thing. So I do not care at all if you model that or if you don't model that. You should model this metal thing, because that's physically attached to the pot. But like this weird plate, if you want to go for it, cool. If not, I don't really care. I mostly just used it as a stand so that it was easier to get sort of straightish pictures. But yeah, so that is pretty much all I had for you guys. I'll go ahead